Welcome to Tiger Chainsaw Interviews. These exclusive interviews will give you a behind-the-scenes retrospective mixed in with some amazing secrets of your favorite games and franchises by the developers and creators of them. Now, if I have filmed the interview, you'll be able to watch it. Otherwise, it's a phone interview, so just sit back and relax. Now, I have done some incredible exclusive interviews with some amazing gaming legends in this community. So hit that sub button to make sure you don't miss any of those interviews. Alright, let's get to our interview of the day. Before this interview starts, I just wanted to say how proud I am to conduct this interview with Corey and Lori Cole. Growing up, Quest for Glory had a profound impact on my life, and it helped shape me as a gamer. As a young kid, I did not have a ton of games, so I put countless hours into Quest for Glory, and seeing Corey and Lori's names flash on the screen, it was pretty surreal for me to interview them after I spent so much time as a kid playing their game. So out of all of the interviews that I've done, this one means the most to me. So before I even begin, thank you, Corey and Lori. My guests today are the co-creators of the classic point-and-click adventure series, Quest for Glory. The first game is one of my all-time favorite games, and I am very excited to welcome Corey and Lori Cole. Together, they created the Quest for Glory series and have been married for over 40 years. Thank you both for joining me today. So Corey, I'm going to start with you. It looks like your first video game credit dates back to 1974 for a game called Blackjack. But it was about 15 years. It was about 15 years until you returned to creating games in 1989. What were you doing between 1974 and 1989, and kind of how did you guys end up at Sierra?
Where did you find that credit?
Well, I saw it at mobygames.com.
That's interesting. Okay, so when I was in college, some friends introduced me to this new hot thing, which was called Play-Doh, out of the University of Illinois. And my school, UC Santa Barbara, had an experimental system that was connecting to Play-Doh over the ARPANET. It was originally only dedicated connections, and one of our engineers had come up with a way of using the ARPANET to connect into Play-Doh. And so I did all kinds of games there, and one of them was writing a version of Blackjack for Play-Doh. Not a commercial game. I'm would be surprised if anyone played it other than myself. But so in the 70s, basically when I was working at regular programming jobs, I did a couple of games. My bigger one, I think, was my tic-tac-toe game that I did at GIAC Computers. But as everyone who has tried to, is a big gaming fan, has learned, is it's really hard to break into the game industry. And we finally managed to do that through a friend in 1988.
And is that how you kind of ended up at Sierra?
Yeah. So we had published a Dungeons & Dragons and fantasy gaming fan magazine through the American Mensa Society that we called the Spellbook, and played locally in the San Francisco Bay Area. And one of the people that we played with was Carly Hawksdaughter, who was a freelance animator who had done work for Sierra.
Okay.
Lori, are you standing next to something that's making a lot of noise?
I'm wondering this, but I should...
Why don't you stop wondering?
Okay.
Yeah, that was getting a huge amount of noise in it. Okay, anyway, so Carly was an animator on King's Quest IV, and she called us up close to midnight one night and said that Ken Williams was looking for some top fantasy role-playing game designers to create a new role-playing game for Sierra. And so I called up Ken and talked with him for a while. And he wasn't actually too interested in getting another designer from outside the company. But what he did say was that, he asked me why was I qualified. And I said, I'm a programmer, so when I do game design, I can talk to the programmers in ways that they'll understand. And he said, what kind of programming have you done? I said, my latest project was a desktop publishing system for the Atari ST. And at that point, the conversation, the whole tone completely changed as it turned out that Ken had a need for an Atari ST programmer in-house. So that was my entree into Sierra, and from there they talked to Lori about actually designing the game.
So that was your end, the Atari ST, all right. So Corey, how did you and Lori meet, and who was interested first?
No, Lori, you want to handle that one?
No.
Okay. We met at the WesterCon Science Fiction Convention in San Francisco, and I had gone up there on a complete whim with some gaming friends from USC, and drove up with like 8 of us in a van, and that was the first and last convention that I actually tried to put together a costume for the costume competition. And meanwhile, I had my game, The Tower of Indomitable Circumstance, was a module that I was in the process of getting published by Judges Guild, and I took that up and did a demonstration run at the convention. And there was this rather attractive young lady wandered in and was kind of looking around. So I asked her, "Are you looking for a game? We've got a space." And she says, "Yeah, sure." And so that was our first meeting. And then she helped me with makeup because she had a theater background. And my costume wasn't good enough to be worth anything, but that was okay. But yeah, so she got to play in my game and liked it, and we just talked for hours and hours. And, decided we liked each other.
Sounds like you guys really hit it off. Lori, this question is for you. How did the concept of Heroes Quest form? Where did this idea come from?
Well, we had been doing Dungeons and Dragons games for a long time at that point. And some of the most memorable moments of playing the game was when we really, had a good dungeon master that really made us feel like we were there, and these moments of great heroism really is an emotional, lift when you get that in a game. And so that's what we wanted to create for the player, is effectively try and get the player to feel that great high of accomplishment when you as a character in a game, accomplish something great.
Let me interject that when you look at tabletop Dungeons & Dragons, you have quite a range of games, and the most common one is what they call hack and slash, where, basically the dungeon master, sets a monster out on the table, and the players use their skills to try to defeat the monster. But we were both lucky enough to play with a few dungeon masters that went well beyond that, and that really painted a story and set up an environment and made you feel like you were in a fantasy world instead of just hacking at a monster. And so we were able to expand on those ideas and say, it'd be nice to do something like that in a computer game, because all the computer games we've seen are really just monster slaying, and we think, from our experience, that we can do a lot more.
Yeah, we were really disappointed in the computer games of that time because they had so much potential, but they just weren't quite catching the right flavor and the expression of real storytelling within them.
Well, kind of going off of that, the writing in Heroes Quest and Quest for Glory is just phenomenal. It's witty, it's hilarious. How much free reign did you have to write the jokes and the dialogue? Did you have to bounce off the dialogue off other people, or are you just kind of naturally funny?
Well, some of it is natural funny, and some of it is that we had funny people around us, especially with the first game, when none of us knew what we were doing, because it was most of our first games, including a lot of people on the team. I was writing all the dialogue and the main story plot and things, but the programmers were actually doing things like what you get, what message comes up if you try to look at a tree or something like that. And one of our chief programmers on the team was putting in funny things, and that sort of like triggered everything. I mean, and that and the fact that we had, I mean, this was, my plan originally was this grand, heroic, very dramatic story, but my initial artist that was put on the team gave me cartoons, and that kind of would be at odds with what we were doing, what our plans were. So I had to adapt my story and the way we dealt with this to reflect that, okay, we have a more cartoony style, we have a more lighthearted, because it's visually lighthearted, so the dialogue and the characters have to reflect the environment and the things we're doing, so to try to integrate it. So more and more humor got put in as we went along.
And I'm naturally crazy, so today I was driving and saw a sign about a wife exchange, and I thought that was an interesting concept. I wondered how much I could get for Lori, and then reread it and realized the word was actually wine. But I just am constantly misreading things and start thinking about what if that really was what it said.
That's the perfect type of humor for Quest for Glory.
So that's where some of it comes from. Is Lori would get into a serious design discussion with me, and I'd get bored after a minute or two and start saying something ridiculous and silly. And then instead of throwing it away as ridiculous and silly, she'd say, "Well, what if this?" And then we'd go back and forth, and eventually come up with something that was, genuinely funny instead of just ridiculous.
So, Quest for Glory, it's known for some amazing characters. Which was the first character that you developed, and who is your favorite character from the first game? And both of you, if you would love to answer that, that'd be great.
Go ahead, Corey. I'll have to think for that, but I think
Would that be Erasmus and Fenris?
Well,
or did they come later?
They came before the game, so I don't think they were developed for the game.
Yeah, but they were kind of a core to the...
Yeah.
So the characters of Erasmus and Fenris actually came from... they actually came from a friend of ours, Richard Aronson, about 10 or 15 years before Sierra. And he had told an anecdote about a mage who got bored, a super powerful wizard who got bored with that and read The Hobbit and decided he wanted to become a Hobbit thief. And so Lordy collaborated on a set of comic strips with him, with Erasmus and Fenris. So since we had free reign with the game, we decided, let's put them in the game. I don't know if they were the first.
Well, they're the first characters.
First one you encounter is probably the sheriff, I guess, is one of the first characters you encounter. But
the Katas were probably...
The Katas, Sabine and Shima.
Yeah, I really liked what I was doing with them, and I liked their characters. But, Corey, your great dialogue.
Oh, yes, my moment in the sun, because Lori writes, wrote like 95% of the dialogue for these games. My moment in the sun were the Meeps, which are these furry creatures living under rocks and holes in the ground. And I came out with what I consider my eternal dialogue of, hiya, pleased to meet ya. And so that was the Meeps. So that was my contribution to the dialogue.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
Hard, but it was fun.
You got to get that green fur.
That's right.
Yep. All right, Corey. So,
and of course, those were inspired by Whack-A-Mole, which was the initial thought of them.
Yeah, when you went into an arcade, they'd have this game called Whack-A-Mole, where you have this huge mallet, and that every once in a while moles would pop up out of holes, and you had to whack them quickly. So we had the idea that these Meeps would pop up out of holes in the ground, and that you had to catch the particular one you wanted to catch in a non-violent way.
So, Corey, I don't know much about programming, but how difficult was it to program 3 separate playthroughs as far as character mechanics? You have a magician user, a fighter, a thief, and whose idea was it to have kind of 3 different character classes?
The initial plan was to have more, but they were going to be very different, that you didn't have a choice of what class you played. You got a choice of who you played, so you could play either a centaur that was a fighter or an elf that was a archer, and we had to learn, all the things we couldn't get away with because there was just too much resource taken up to do that. So mostly we pared down our initial design.
Yeah, so we got down to 3 different versions of the same hero that all looked about the same with minor changes to the model, and that had to do with the amount of time for the animators, but mostly had to do with the fact that games at that point shipped on floppy disks, and many of the players didn't even have a hard drive that they played directly from the floppies. So you couldn't have too excessively much order animation.
And our approach, or at least my approach to game design, was to say, all right, this is a problem. How does the player want to solve it? And so then come up with 3 different approaches for the different character classes of how to solve the same problem. And then I just stuck it on the programmers to figure out how to make it work.
Yeah, so that's how we distinguish adventure game versus role-playing game. In adventure game, traditionally, the designer sets puzzles for the players, and each puzzle has a single unique solution, and once they get that, they move on. Whereas Lori mentioned the word problem, that's more appropriate to a role-playing game where, let's say, your problem is that you're trying to get into a place where a big burly man blocks the door. Okay, so we don't tell you how to solve that. We don't have as a single puzzle. The guys you got to discover the guy's ticklish and tickle him until he leaves. Instead we say, okay, you can fight him. You can trick him into leaving. You might be able to, if you're a magician, you might have a sleep spell and put him to sleep. If you're a rogue, you can knock him, sneak past him or knock him out from behind. So basically the problem is there, but we don't tell you how to solve it. We give you a series of tools, and then you pick the tools you want to use. And so that's how we got through the game with 3 different character classes, is by coming up with the various problems we would be facing in the game. And then we just made sure that all the character classes had, at least one tool that would be appropriate to get past each problem.
Makes perfect sense. This is for both of you. Can you transport me back to the Sierra offices in 1989? When you were starting to create this game, can you describe what your work environment was like? What do you recall? What do you remember about the work environment and your guys' work relationship with everyone else?
Well, I was the contractor. I wasn't an employee, so I wasn't having to come in. I was just going to do this design, and I just deliver the script. That's what I thought. But instead, Sierra's view of what a designer was basically they wanted me to be in charge of a team. We had a small team, small by current standards. We had 2 to 3 artists at any given time, and we had 2 to 3 programmers. I actually got up to 5 programmers, didn't it?
Yeah, so it was about a dozen people in the entire team, and we all sat at. There was a huge room that was like almost like a cafeteria type room that had cubicles. Instead of having like single cubicles for a developer, they used cubicle walls to break it up into virtual rooms. So our virtual room, we had everybody sitting together at desks, and then you could basically, programmer could look over their shoulder, and there would be the artist, and wander over, roll their chair over, whatever, and say, okay, I want to do this, and I'm going to need some animation, specialized animation that does this thing. And the artist would say, well, how about this? And they'd work, would draw some sketches and then go ahead and do the thing. And very frequently, it was like same day that, the artist and the programmer would get together and build a tiny little section of the game. The thing people have to keep in mind in games is that they really are gigantic. Even a small game has just hundreds or thousands or tens of thousands of little things in it that all need to work correctly. So it really just comes down to a grind of just building each little thing in turn, testing them, and going on to the next thing. But that was our experience for the first game, and it was really kind of ideal because everyone was there in one place, and we could all talk to each other, and then
and we got a lot of synergy by way of the team. The one programmer was putting in jokes, and we kept playing off of his jokes. The artist was giving us really fun stuff, and those kept getting, that would alter the tone of things, and really the writing would have to reflect what we were getting, and it just, everything came together very well.
Yeah, it certainly did. I mean, you guys created an incredible series, but also at Sierra, there was King's Quest, Space Quest, and a bunch of other great series there. Was there any type of rivalry between those series and Quest for Glory? Was there any internal competition between you and the others in creating those games?
Well, we were all segregated in our own little areas, so we had no interaction with the other people. So that there wasn't any real physical or anything, but there was always a competition in the sense of resources from Sierra. And, like it had its internal magazine, and they would advertise our games on the magazine, but if there was a King's Quest game, then you knew that was going to get all the advertising, and any other game, the cover. We kept trying to get the cover of the Sierra magazine,
Yeah, they promised us one once, and then for some reason they had something else, so we didn't make it.
We never made the cover. So yes, it was for resources of the marketing and who we had on a team. That's where we were in competition.
So jealousy over marketing support and resource support, but not really any conflict at all between the designers of the teams. And I was also going to say that ideal environment we had lasted exactly one game. By the time we went to Quest for Glory 2, Sierra pulled the rug out from under us and changed all the rules on us. And we had an entirely different environment in which they decided that programmers were polluted by, being in with artists were polluted by being in with programmers, so they had all the artists in a separate area with the art director and the programmers in a different area, and then I, as lead programmer, was supposed to take requests from the programmers, deliver them to the lead artist, who would then assign an artist to it, and eventually stuff would filter back through, and there were always miscommunications and problems with that. So Quest for Glory 2, developing it was a real trial by fire, which is one of the reasons we named it that.
Now, did you try and resist those changes at all? Did you, discuss that with Ken or Roberta?
I did discuss it with the general manager at the time and got into some trouble over it. In fact, I probably came close to getting fired 2 or 3 times at Sierra.
Oh, wow.
But, they didn't want to hear it. And what was going on is we were an experiment. So we were brought in about halfway through our project, and they said the company is moving to point-and-click style with 256 color graphics and scanning all the art from painting instead of drawing on the computer. But we need a game out this fall. And my impression was that, we were given a choice on it. Lori's impression is we were told that we were the one that was going to be the old technology. But we were still the guinea pigs for the new technology. So even though we were still doing 16-color art, all the art now had to be, sketch drawn and scanned in on a scanner, and then later on painted over and the painting scanned in.
In other words, we had to use the process of the new stuff while we were still doing the old stuff.
Well, yeah, old technology with new processes. And I documented that as tripling the development cost of the game without any real improvement in quality. But they didn't really care because they knew we had to go in that direction, and we were the guinea pigs that enabled them to make all the other games.
Yeah, it doesn't really seem too intuitive on that end for you guys. So it's been over 30 years since Heroes Quest was released. Are there any possible secrets that have not been discovered, or is there anything that either of you can share that is just a cool bit of information from a production standpoint or a creative standpoint that may not be public about Quest for Glory that would make fans go, wow, I never knew that?
Well, fortunately, we forgot most of that, so I'm not worried about it too much. We did have a weird one. We do a live stream a couple times a month, and one of the times we live streamed Quest for Glory 2, and I basically started up the game on Steam or GOG, and then was basically talking about the development process and so on as this game was up there, and then turned around and clicked start game, and just at that moment, I got a death message that said my character had starved to death. And so we had no idea that even while that initial movie was playing, that time was passing in the game, but that my character was supposed to have been eating. And of course, couldn't because we haven't started the game yet. So we get surprised by our games occasionally.
It was fun to relive them. Okay, so this is my favorite question to ask the creators and producers because I get so many diverse answers on it. But what's your defining memory of creating Heroes Quest? It could be a funny memory. It could be something that you will always associate that time of your life in. What's that defining memory that when you think back to Heroes Quest, you will never forget?
Tough question.
Yeah, you got tough questions for us. One of mine on practically every game was the moment the music came in, because they brought in the composer typically very late in the project when the game was nearly done. And I can tell you that every single game we've ever done, we've had a loss of confidence on it and worried that we've just created a terrible game. And this game was, it felt kind of bland and boring and so on. And then Mark Siebert came in with the triumphant music for the game and so on. And all of a sudden, all those teams came to life. So for me, I think that's the favorite part of almost every game. It's when the music comes in.
Yeah, that's when everything comes together and suddenly it's magic.
Yeah, I would agree.
It was certainly true on Quest for Glory 5, our last game, where we honestly had the music first before we had anything of the game. But I had the design out and worked with the music director right away, and we also weren't getting a game out anytime soon, so they poured money into actually getting great music. And we had where all the team got to get together, and they actually played this music, and it was just really magical. That was the most magical. I was in tears from that one. As all this, as this beautiful music and knowing that this was going to be, a great game just right there. And at the first game, I think it was just some of the, let's say that one of the artists we had on the team at that time, we didn't have lead artists, Jerry Moore, was just incredibly creative, and he's the one that really gave us some of the wackiest parts of Quest for Glory 1 and the Heroes Quest. He gave us, we wouldn't have had the weird maze at the end of the game, the trap sequences that we had that were all sequential. All of those really were because he thought this would be cool, and so we just had to make it work and brought it in. Especially that silly one with the Yorick the Jester's room was all his.
And my counterpoint to that is a different maze, which is I had come up with the rules for a game called Mage's Maze that you play against the Wizard Erasmus, and had drawn kind of, on a piece of graph paper, a little, diagram of how what the maze was going to look like and stuff like that. And then Ken Nishue, the artist, took that and he proceeded to use lateral thinking and draw something that was, in a mathematical sense, topographically identical to what I had done and visually completely different. So he turned it into a real 3D looking environment, and having mountains and going through tunnels in the mountains and stuff like that. And took this little, bunch of boxes and lines that I had drawn and turned it into just a lovely piece of art. So that was exciting for me to see, how the synergy of the team can take a design and bring it up a level.
Mage's Maze is the single part of Quest for Glory that I cannot beat still. It still drives me nuts. So,
well, you have to, first of all, do the grinding, as, what you learn from modern RPGs is you have to build up the amount of magic points you have. You have to have some magic potions, and you have to build up your spell skill, because the higher the spell skill you have, the longer your spells last.
That makes sense. I need to earn that magic points. All right, I got
do the work to get ready for it.
Yeah, absolutely. I have 3 very quick questions for you guys. This just lighthearted questions, but how long have you guys been married?
Far too long? Is that the answer, Larry?
Yeah, what is the calculation at this point?
My calculation, okay, so we have George Orwell's 1984. So that reminds me that the World Science Fiction Convention in Los Angeles was based on that and had a rat theme. They called it RatCon. So that was 1984, and that we had gotten together and had gone together. Worldcon is every 3 years on the West Coast. I'm going kind of out of. So the short answer is 1982. We got married.
Yes, that's the short answer.
Met in 79, married in 82.
How we remember it is in mathematical complications. Yeah.
It's by which science fiction conventions we went to.
All right, so my real question is, you two seem very happy. I love how witty you are and how you play off each other.
It's the 40th anniversary this year.
Oh, really? Okay, that tells you.
Well,
I guess we better do something.
What's the secret to a happy marriage?
I guess each person having their roles and enjoying what they're doing.
I figure it's stubbornness, but it's worth to quit.
That too. Cost-benefit analysis. Is it worth it to leave them?
Yeah, we each have things about the other that occasionally drive us crazy, and we work through that because that's not the most important thing.
Oh, well, that's good to hear. Let's see here. Oh, so I did read Ken's book, Not All Fairy Tales Have Happy Endings. Did you guys read that? What did you think, if you did?
I don't know. Did you read that, Lori?
I didn't read that, but you did. You helped proofread.
I read the early draft of it and made some suggestions, and then read the final version. I like the book. I think it's a nice counterpoint, because you get to... when you get to biographies and stuff, you get kind of like the good parts version of the brilliant things an inventor does and stuff like that. Or if you read books about games, then, you read about the games themselves and maybe something about the creativity of the designers. But this one is about the business of making games. And I think it's an interesting thing because people do not realize that. I just recently answered a question from somebody that was complaining that our previous game cost $30, and that was just way too much for him, and asked if he could have a copy, and told us that we should lower the price, and we should put it on something like Humble Bundle, where people can buy it for a much lower price. I had to tell him, okay, we spent $1 million in this game, and we've gotten back, we got about $500,000 from Kickstarter, and about $200,000 from sales, leaving us $300,000 in the hole. So I said, well, if we put in Humble Bundle and got $1 per copy instead of $10 per copy, how long would we be in business? How many more games would we make?
Yeah.
And so he finally said, oh, well, I guess you guys are even poorer than I am, so forget about the free game. But people don't really get that the economics of making games is a very tough business. And so I like Ken's book that it talked about the fact that, how you go about selling these games as well as making them.
Well,
it was a good book. It was pretty honest. His version of reality may have been at odds with some of ours, but, that's life.
Occasionally. But Sierra changed dramatically. When we were there, I started in 88, and our first game came out in 89. So that's the first thing people don't realize is that games are probably in progress for a year or more before they actually come out. It takes time to develop, and these days it's more like 5 or 10 years. But at that point, everybody at the company got profit sharing on the games and so on, and that lasted about a year, about the time I would have started getting profit sharing checks, they decided that they weren't profitable enough to do that.
Yeah.
And that it wasn't appropriate if they were going to go public, which they wanted to do. And just every year, things changed. Okay, so anyway, yeah, he talks about some of this stuff, but the games business is a tough one. I was going to say our budget for the first game cost about $150,000 to make, and by the time we did our fifth game in the Quest for Glory series 10 years later, it cost about $3.5 million to make.
Incredible.
Just as people expect, higher production values and so on, it's really difficult for the company actually to stay afloat.
Yeah, no, I believe it. So, what are you two up to now? Do you have any projects going on? Are you enjoying retirement? Are you making games? What are you guys up to?
Well, we're about to release a game, actually.
Perfect.
We just did a game we released 2 years ago, which was Hero U Rogue to Redemption.
We're almost 4 now, but it feels like
4?
2.
It's been 4.
2018, July 2018.
Yikes. And since then, we've been working on another series of games, and we're just about to release Summer Days at Hero U Tilly's Tale, which we've been working on for all this time, too.
We've been working on for the last 3 or 4 years. So basically, it's 2 years subtracting out the pandemic, which took away all of our time. Anyway, so Tilly's Tale is entirely by Lori. I'm only involved as a manager. And it is a storybook type game that is a cross between a interactive visual novel and an adventure game in which you play mischievous rogue Tilly as she builds relationships with other people at the Hero University and tries to put on a successful end of summer harvest festival.
And if we want to find it, where can we find it?
It will be on Steam and GOG, and probably a couple other places.
It'll be on the phone. Yeah, you'll be able to play it on your phone.
Oh, that's a theory. We haven't actually tested it.
Well, we have tested it. We tested it right from the beginning.
Yeah, so at the very beginning we did. We haven't done it recently. We need to get more people on to test stuff.
Yeah.
So we're working with a very skeleton crew at this point because games are expensive to make, and we're not making money at them yet.
When do you expect it to release?
I'm sorry?
When do you expect?
When do you expect it?
Yeah.
We expect it this spring. I've been saying March or April, but I'm suspecting it's going to move back to April to May time frame.
We'll have it out. We did Kickstarters on it, and we'll have it out to the people that supported it in the next month or so.
Yeah, and I've actually been saying February for that, but we want to make sure that it's essentially bug-free before they get it. And it's just a few little
tweaks.
Yeah, a few little tweaks. I used to espouse the 90-90 project rule. If you've heard of the 80-20 Pareto principle. So the 90-90 rule says that getting the first 90% of a game done takes 90% of your schedule as expected, and getting the last 10% done takes the other 90% of your schedule. And that's why all games are late.
Yeah.
So yes, we have been 4 months ago. I put out a thing that said we were just about to go into early access, and 4 months later, we're still fixing little problems that need to be fixed before anybody can get their hands on it. If you haven't already, definitely check out our previous game, which is Hero-U, Hero-U, letter U, Rogue to Redemption, and that's up on Steam and GOG and itch.
And it's a kind of it's a different game from Quest for Glory, but it's set in the same world as Quest for Glory. And there are references back to the original game, so any Quest for Glory fan will really enjoy playing it.
What?
Anybody who likes role-playing games or adventure games should like it because it is, once again, a hybrid of both.
Well, I'm absolutely going to check it out then. That sounds phenomenal.
Oh, you should. Yeah, we've been hearing from people who are Quest for Glory fans that it's a better game than Quest for Glory.
Oh, that's some good praise right there. But Yeah, I just wanted to thank both of you for taking time out of your day for this interview, and I truly want to thank you for creating Quest for Glory. It was one of the first games I ever played. I went back to my hometown a couple months ago, and I was going through my bedroom, and I found all these comics that I made, and it was comics of Quest for Glory, and I was drawing all of them, and it's just so surreal, how you made all these memories for me. So just thank you both so much.
Great.
Oh, that's wonderful.